Hi friends, this is another topic in special senses. In this topic we will learn the pupillary reactions, and what I mean here is we will look at the pupillary light reflex that when the torch light is thrown in one eye, there is constriction of the pupil in that eye and the constriction of the pupil in the other eye as well. I mean, where the light has not been thrown, there will be constriction of the pupil. So why is that? And the entire pathway for pupillary light reflex. And then we will also see the accommodation reaction. When we want to read something or we want to see an object nearby, the changes that happen in the eye are called as collectively called as accommodation reaction. So what changes happen in the pupil there during the accommodation reaction? And then the Argyll Robertson pupil. To begin with, let me just introduce by saying that this is a typical pupil, the Argyll Robertson pupil, which is described like this. In this pupil, and this is a famous mnemonic, accommodation reaction is present, ARP, accommodation reaction present, but PRA, pupillary reflex absent. So Argyll Robertson pupil is described like this: accommodation reaction is present, but pupillary reflex is absent. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is the pupil constricts when there is accommodation to see the nearby objects, but when the torch light is thrown in the eye, the pupil does not constrict. Pupillary reflex absent. So what must be the reason? What's the disease in which this kind of pupil is seen? Let's try to understand that. Before that, let's just discuss the pupillary light reflex and accommodation reaction. The pupillary light reflex, a simple thing, when we throw the torch light in the eye, the pupils constrict. It's a classic negative feedback. To reduce and limit the amount of light entering the eyes, the pupil will become narrow, they will constrict. So, let's see the pathway for this. What nerves are involved? If these are our eyes and this is the visual pathway, when the torch light is thrown in one eye, here is the pupil. When the torch light is thrown in one eye, it falls on the retina and impulses about the light are taken by the second cranial nerve. So, sensory nerve for the pupillary light reflex, simply called as reaction to light or pupillary light reflex. Second cranial nerve takes the impulses about this torch light, and then there is third nerve nucleus, oculomotor nerve nucleus. Let's draw it diagrammatically over here. The third nerve nucleus. It's called as Edinger-Westphal nucleus. I'll just draw it here. Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the third cranial nerve, oculomotor nerve. So, impulses will come back from the oculomotor nerve nucleus, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and there will be constriction of the pupil. Signals were carried, means afferent nerve or sensory nerve for the light is of course second cranial nerve, optic nerve, and third cranial nerve, the oculomotor nerve, is the motor nerve, efferent nerve, which comes back and causes constriction of the pupil in the same eye. But there is one link which we have not described here. That link is pretectal nucleus. So, impulses from the second cranial nerve regarding the light, they are carried first to the pretectal nucleus. Pretectal nucleus. Look, in the midbrain region, this nucleus is present. In fact, you know, tectum is the roof of the midbrain. So, second cranial nerve passes the impulse to the pretectal nucleus. Pretectal nucleus sends that to the third nerve nucleus, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which will come back. So, pretectal nucleus is the interneuron. Okay, sensory nerve is the second nerve, motor nerve is the third nerve, oculomotor nerve, and between them, between these two nerves, second and third, there is pretectal nucleus neurons. So, it's an interneuron which connects second and third cranial nerve. Okay, so sensory is second, motor is third, connection, the interneuron is the pretectal nucleus. That's the pathway for light reflex. Now, next point, when you throw the torchlight in one eye, not only that same eye or pupil constricts, but the opposite side pupil also constricts. There is constriction on the other side also. How is that? Why is that? Okay, now that's called as consensual light reflex, indirect light reflex or consensual light reflex. Why does that happen? Consensual light reflex. Light was not thrown in that eye. So, why the constriction of the pupil on the other eye? The reason is, or the connection is, the light thrown in one eye, impulses carried by the second cranial nerve, then to the pretectal nucleus, and from there to the third cranial nerve nucleus, oculomotor nerve nucleus or Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the same side, as well as to the opposite side. Pretectal nucleus of one side is connected to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus on both sides, means it is connected with the same side third nerve nucleus as well as on the opposite side, opposite hemisphere. There are two cerebral hemispheres, there are two eyes, there are two oculomotor nerve nuclei, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, right? So, pretectal nucleus, once it receives impulses about the light, it signals to the third nerve nucleus of the same side as well as to the opposite side. This is Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the opposite side. So, the third nerve on the opposite side has also got stimulated, Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and it will carry the impulses back to that eye, and constriction will be seen in the opposite eye as well. So, my point was, pretectal nucleus on one side is connected to the third nerve nucleus on both sides. So, if you throw the torchlight in that eye, pretectal nucleus on that side is also connected with third nerve nucleus on both sides, and therefore, whichever eye you throw the light on, whichever side, constriction is going to happen on both sides. Because of this, the interneuron is connected on both sides, pretectal nucleus in the midbrain region. Right. Now, next, this was about the pupillary light reflex. Now, let us see the accommodation reaction. I am not calling it a reflex, I am calling it a reaction. Accommodation reaction, sometimes called as accommodation convergence reaction. Let me just explain quickly what this accommodation reaction is. Look, far point of our vision is 6 meters, 6 meters and beyond. Any object which you are looking at, if it is at 6 meters and up beyond 6 meters up to infinity, the parallel rays coming from such an object will automatically focus on the retina. That means no changes in the eyes will be needed to see such an object, which is 6 meters from the eye or beyond 6 meters, anywhere up to infinite distance. But if the object starts coming within 6 meters, if there are objects within 6 meters from the eyes, and if they are coming closer, any object which is closer than 6 meters, the image will go beyond the retina. And in order to form the image on the retina, some changes are needed in the eyes. Some changes should happen in the eyes in order to focus the image on the retina. Look, this was the object at 6 meters and its image was automatically formed on the retina. But if the object starts coming closer within 6 meters distance, its image will go beyond the retina first, and in order to make the image on the retina, some changes in the eyes will be necessary. Those changes are collectively called as accommodation reaction. Okay, so those changes in the eye to look at the near object, to form its image on the retina, some changes in the eye happen, and those changes in the eyes collectively called as accommodation reaction. So, what are those changes? Let me first say how this accommodation reaction happens. What's the pathway for this? Let's say these are eyes. This is the visual pathway, optic nerve fiber, then there is optic chiasma, optic tract, then lateral geniculate body, and finally optic radiation in the occipital lobe. Now what happens is, this is the visual pathway and visual cortex in the occipital lobe. When the object comes within 6 meters and the image starts forming behind the retina, the signals regarding the blurred image, remember, signals regarding the blurred image, because the object is close and image is not forming properly on the retina. So a blurred image signals are taken by the visual pathway and they reach the visual cortex, occipital lobe, visual cortex. The signals are reaching there, and because the image is blurred, then to make it clear means what? We will have to increase the curvature of the crystalline lens inside the eye. The lens will have to be made more convex. Its dioptric strength will have to increase. Only then the image which is going beyond the retina, because the lens power is increasing. Lens means crystalline lens inside our eyes. Its power increases, dioptric strength increases, it becomes more convex. That means it will cause more convergence of the rays, and then those rays will form image on the retina. So, what change is needed in the eye? Principally, what change is needed? Increase the curvature of the lens, increase the dioptric power of the lens. How does that happen? Look, once the blurred image signals reach the visual cortex in the occipital lobe, then the signals are sent forward to the third cranial nerve nucleus, Edinger-Westphal nucleus. It has come again. Third cranial nerve nucleus or oculomotor nerve nucleus, the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the third nerve. So, occipito-oculomotor fibers from the visual cortex to the third nerve nucleus. And then the third nerve will come back to the eye. In fact, the signals are sent to both eyes. And you know, oculomotor nerve nucleus causes what? It causes contraction of the ciliary body. Contraction of the ciliary body. So, the lens which is suspended by the suspensory ligaments. The tension on the suspensory ligaments is released and the lens becomes more globular. Its curvature increases. Radius of curvature increases means dioptric power of the lens increases. I repeat once again, when the oculomotor nerve nucleus sends signals, the Edinger-Westphal nucleus sends the signals back, the third cranial nerve is coming back to the eye, and this oculomotor nerve, it causes contraction of the ciliary muscle, and contraction of the ciliary muscle increases the dioptric power of the lens inside our eyes, which is what was the requirement primarily, that we have to see the nearby objects. So, accommodation reaction is changes that happen in the eye in order to see the near object. First was increase in the curvature of the lens inside the eye, crystalline lens of our eyes. Second is medial rotation of the eyes. This you can see yourself. When the object is coming closer and closer and closer, both the eyes, they converge, and they converge near the midline like this. You need to look at the object, the eyes show a medial rotation. So, convergence of the eyes, also called as medial rotation of the eyes, and medial rotation is because of contraction of the medial rectus muscle on both sides. So, medial rotation and constriction of the pupils. Constriction of the pupils, we have seen this is also a function of the third cranial nerve. It causes constriction of the pupils. So, these three changes collectively called as accommodation reaction or convergence accommodation reaction. Why constriction of the pupils? Because only the central rays coming from the object should go through both the pupils. Peripheral rays should be cut off, and therefore pupils constrict, they become narrow. Now, that's accommodation reaction, and this is the pathway for accommodation reaction. Image was formed on the retina, it was a blurred image, it sent the signals from the via the second cranial nerve, the optic nerve. This is the lateral geniculate body, and then visual cortex in the occipital lobe. Blurred image has been perceived, so tells the cortex, and cortex sends fiber signals to the front, to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, and from there the third nerve comes back and causes these three changes. All three changes caused by the third cranial nerve, Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Now, having said all this, finally let me tell you about the Argyll Robertson pupil. Remember what we said at the beginning of this discussion. Argyll Robertson pupil is such a pupil in which accommodation reaction is present, but pupillary reflex is absent. What do we mean by that? Accommodation reaction is present means when you want to look at the nearby object, the changes will happen in the eyes. Means what? Pupil will constrict that time. Constriction of the pupil happens that to look at the near object. Accommodation involves constriction of the pupils. So, pupil will constrict when you are looking at the near object, but pupillary reflex means pupillary light reflex is absent. ARP, PRA, pupillary light reflex is absent. Means what? When you throw the torch light on the retina, that times the pupil will not constrict. Pupillary light reflex is absent. That's Argyll Robertson pupil. So, pupil is constricting when you are trying to look at the near object, but pupil is not constricting when the torch light is thrown in the eye. So, now after all this discussion, you can tell me where is the lesion that is causing this Argyll Robertson pupil. Look, accommodation reaction is present, means this pathway is intact. Second nerve, occipital lobe, visual cortex, and fibers coming in front and third cranial nerve nucleus, oculomotor nerve nucleus, all that is intact. Pupillary light reflex is absent. So even in the pupillary light reflex, second nerve was needed, third nerve was needed, and what else was needed? Pretectal nucleus. Now this being absent means the only interpretation is lesion is at the level of pretectal nucleus in the midbrain. Okay. See, accommodation reaction can still be present, means signals are taken to the occipital lobe and signal come back to the third cranial nerve. All that is present. So accommodation reaction present means this pathway is present, intact. But light reflex is absent. That means signal from second nerve are going to the pretectal nucleus and from there to the third cranial nerve nucleus. This connection must have been damaged, lesioned in the midbrain, lesion at the level of pretectal nucleus, which was needed for light reflex but not needed for accommodation reaction. Remember, pretectal nucleus was not involved in accommodation reaction. It is needed in the pupillary light reflex. Therefore, lesion in the pretectal nucleus will cause absence of pupillary light reflex, but no effect on the accommodation reaction. When does that happen? Midbrain lesions such as these, neurosyphilis is or tertiary syphilis is one such condition in which you may see Argyll Robertson pupil. So such lesions in that region are going to result in Argyll Robertson pupil. That was a small topic for today.